My name is Matt Klinsky, and today we're going to talk about the various stages a new staffing firm goes into as they continue to grow from startup phase to growth phase to really that stabilization phase. I'm going to talk about this because a lot of our branch managers throughout the country who are working for big companies are thinking about starting their own business. And I just want to say congratulations again to those guys who are really taking that leap and becoming an entrepreneur and starting your own business. I think it's a great opportunity. As you start to plan your business, I want you to learn what are the phases you need to go through, what changes and challenges will you experience at each phase of your growth so that you can make the best decision for your business. So today I'm going to start off by saying that the staffing firm phases, I wish somebody would have told me this sooner. I had to learn this going through the motions and experiencing it. We have about 250 authorized dealers through our operation, and we have authorized dealers in all three phases. Our program allows you to grow quickly without really that hesitation. But if you're thinking about going on your own and getting, like I mentioned, all those vendors in the last video I've done, today I want to talk about what phases are you going to be going through throughout the process. And so this column I'm going to use kind of for like measurement statistics and whatnot. So one thing is, how many people are you going to need? So number of people, and I'm talking about like the in-house, kind of corporate people. Typically startups going to be 1 to 2. Growth oriented, you have to think about more recruiters, more account managers. Maybe you start bringing stuff in-house like a payroll processor. So typically growth is 4 to 5 employees or partners. And then stable is really, you're probably going to have between 8 and 10 people once you kind of get up and running. 2 or 3 recruiters, 2 or 3 account managers, a payroll processor, an accountant. All those things kind of come in at that stabilization phase. I mentioned this before, but in general, a well-run staffing firm is going to make between 5 and 7% net profit. And so when you talk about an industry that has $186 billion in revenue, you have to you kind of measure your growth phase in terms of revenue. And so what is the revenue for each stage? So in startup, I typically think 0 to about 2 million in sales. Now you might think, wow, 2 million sales, that's a great business. But when you do 2 million and you do 5% of 2 million, that's about $100,000 in net profit. And while that's a great amount of money, the $2 million seems like it should be making more money net profit. And the reason for that is that about 75% of the revenue goes to payroll for the temporary workers. So in this general, 75% of $2 million, about $1.5 million goes to the payroll for the temporary workers. And then the rest of that $500,000 kind of typically is the operational costs, your payroll processing costs, and all those kind of non-essential items related to the payroll itself. So, but in general, 5% is a good number, a good estimate to understand how much money you're going to make from a temporary staffing organization. From a growth phase, we're thinking 2 million to about 5 million. And then stabilization, I'm calling it 5 million, but probably closer to 7 to 10 million is really where you become stable. And realize that until you're making about 30 to 40 million in revenue, you're really not even on anybody's map or radar regarding acquisitions or a large scaling, players. That 30 to 50 million is that range where you kind of get noticed. And so just put it in the back of your mind, once you get to the 2 million, you're not kind of the big dog in the park. The big dog in the park is at 50 to 100 million in revenue. But you can still have an impact with your customers and your community, and you can really grow a thriving business. The next thing I want to talk about is kind of number of temporary workers we think about. So temp workers or contractors. And really the reason why this is important is as the number of contractors increase, so does your liability. So if you were to have one worker in the field, the chances of a workers' comp claim probably pretty small. But once you have 100 workers in the field, you're almost guaranteed to have a workers' comp claim And so just keep that in mind when it comes to planning from a workers' comp, a risk stratification process in general. All right. So this can range also based on your payroll, your pay rate, and your bill rate. And so again, these numbers are from the bill rates or the revenue. But temporary workers, anywhere again from 0 to 15 workers. The growth phase is going to be between 25 to 100 workers, and then stable phase is going to be greater than 100 workers. And this is general, broad speaking, but I just want to let kind of just fill you in, because a lot of times the bigger firms, again, the 30 to 50 million are going to have 300, 400, 1,000 temps in the field. But everybody has to start somewhere. And so everybody who's going to start their business starts at zero, and yourself. But 0 to 15 workers is really that startup phase. You can generate some revenue from that. I might even go up to 20. Actually, let's do 25, because I did 25 to 50 there. So 0 to 25, that seems to be the good number. And really, you want to think about, okay, how many people do you need to hire in-house in order to manage those 25 workers? Do you actually have to hire one additional person to onboard them, to collect their time cards, or can you partner with somebody that does the work for you? All right. So the next thing in general is number of recruiters to help. Typically, I talked about this in here, but and I guess I could just add to it. So startup phase, typically you can do it with yourself and a partner, or yourself and one recruiter. It depends. What I always recommend is, when it comes to business development and recruiting, do you feel like you're stronger as the business development or the recruiter, and then hire or partner with somebody to do the opposite? So if you came from a background as you're the branch manager and you really were strong with the customers, then you might want to hire somebody to help you with the recruiting component of your business. So I talked about the recruiters up there. Really, the next thing is office space or locations. Typically, is one location here. During the growth phase, I highly encourage you to have one location. But if you're working in multiple states, sometimes you're going to need multiple locations. So this is, maybe 1 to 2 locations. Ideally, just keep it to 1. But once you get, bigger, typically you're going to need, probably 2 to 3 locations. Just depends on the strategy you're doing. It might be a customer site that you have a remote office in. A lot of offices now, like the Regis office, you can have multiple offices for $150 or $200 a month. But you might want to just think about that when you're planning your strategies regarding your customer acquisition, which states you're going to be in, and how everything is going to roll. And then really the last thing is going to be your funding, because funding plays a role in all of your business operations. Funding is really, when you're doing $2 million in sales, we could just do the math real quick. If you're doing $2 million in sales, that's about $40,000 a week in billing, or about $30,000 a week in payroll. So if you need payroll for, let's say, 8 weeks, just to be on the generous side, you're going to need $250,000 of line of credit, and that's assuming they pay on time. And that's assuming that that's kind of like the normal kind of net 45 to 60 day kind of terms. Obviously, some customers pay quicker, some customers pay longer. You just have to make sure you go into those relationships knowing that you have a finite amount, and that finite would be $250,000. If you can get more, great. Like I mentioned on a previous video, there's options like factoring, but typically you're going to have about a $250,000 to $400,000 outstanding accounts receivable. The growth phase, you're probably going to, again, probably double it, but probably more than double it, because in order to get to that next phase, you're probably going to have a couple customers paying, longer terms that you're going to have to borrow for longer periods of time. So I would say probably up to about $650,000 in funding that you would need to secure, again, through factoring, lines of credit, asset-based lending. But these are factors. If you need to get to this phase, you need to start thinking about these numbers fast, because your payroll is going to stack up on top of itself. And then, of course, when you're doing $5 million a year, you're doing $100,000 a week in billing. So that's $80,000 a week in payroll. So again, you just kind of think about it in terms of 75% of your billing should be dedicated to payroll. What do those numbers look like? when you're doing 5 million in sales, that's about 100,000 a week in payroll, or sorry, in billing. And so you just kind of have to do the numbers and work backwards from there. So it's about going to be probably about $1 million in accounts receivable or more. I mean, it depends on the terms, like I mentioned before. But these are things that you have to think about. Now, with our program, the Authorized Dealer Program, we take care of all this. You know, we have that flexible workforce. We have a team of 9 people in a corporate Tampa that's going to help you as you need it. You don't have to pay for any payroll outside of your pocket. When it comes to the revenue, we're going to support you. We have 250 authorized dealers throughout our network, and we have authorized dealers in all 3 phases. From a temp worker standpoint, obviously we have that staffing coordinator, the operations, we have the payroll team in-house, so you don't have to worry about hiring anybody on to do the work for you. Office locations, most of our authorized dealers do work out of their home, and that's totally fine. From a registration office, we take care of that logistics registration for all 50 states. We also follow those payroll taxes, so you don't really have to kind of register in any states. You don't need an office in all the states that you're going into. And then when it comes to funding, we take care of that. We work with you as a partner to take care of the funding, not only for your current customers, but for future customers. We have a discussion with you regarding accounts receivable management. This is what we're seeing. This is the credit limits we've been able to secure. And so we work for you to achieve that. So either way, if you're going to think about our Authorized Dealer Program, we'd love to talk to you further about the program. If you're thinking about starting off yourself, this is hopefully helpful to kind of get through the 3 stages to get you to 5 million in sales. And then there's a whole bucket of new challenges after 5 million in sales. Like I mentioned, the goal is really to get to that 50 million in sales. So wherever you're at in this diagram or chart, we'd love to talk to you further about our services. Please let me know if I can help you in any way. Again, this is Matt Kalinsky, and I look forward to talking with you. Thanks.